What's up, everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We are going to analyze macroeconomic systems exactly like we'd reviewed the latest tech drops. Think about it. We're comparing national economies as if they were smartphone specs and software operating systems. We're talking hardware capabilities, system lag, OS features, and network syncing. So if you've ever wondered how different countries run their economic hardware and software to maximize output, you are absolutely in the right place. Let's power on. To really grasp the global economy, you kind of have to look at the devices currently on the market. A developed economy, that is essentially your ultra-optimized flagship phone. It comes with maximum RAM right out of the box, pre-installed high-grade infrastructure, and it runs incredibly smoothly for the end user. On the flip side, a developing economy is like a budget phone. Now, it boasts massive latent processing potential, but right now, it's bottlenecked by internal lag, bloatware, and maybe a lack of premium components. Both devices totally have their place in a market, but their out-of-the-box user experience is vastly different. All right, let's dive into Section 1, the hardware specs, developed versus developing. Okay, before you can run high-level software, you need to know exactly what kind of physical specs you're dealing with, right? A developed economy, think of countries like the USA, Canada, and New Zealand, is defined by a high real per capita income. Its citizens basically enjoy a premium standard of living. An underdeveloped or developing economy, though, is defined as a country where that real per capita income is currently on the lower end. But seriously, don't count it out, because its defining feature is its immense potentiality for development. The hardware is literally all there. It just needs the right upgrades. Think of human capital as the literal processor inside your national device. In a low-spec configuration, which you'd see in a developing economy, you might find poor sanitation, lower literacy ratios, and inadequate health facilities. You simply cannot run heavy, complex applications on that kind of chip. But then you look at the pro-spec configuration of a developed nation. It features high literacy, advanced education levels, and adequate availability of health and sanitation systems. They're fully ready for the heavy lifting. Now, you've also got to consider what I call the population growth shock. In developing zones, populations are surging at a massive 2 to 3% annually, and that's due to high birth rates combined with falling death rates. In tech terms, this is like launching a flood of new background processes all at exactly the same time on a budget processor. It puts an incredible strain on the system's limited resources. Contrast that with our flagship devices, the developed countries. Their population growth rate hovers around a very slow, very manageable 0.6% to 1% per annum. This translates to less overall population density. And because there are fewer competing processes, the people in these economies can actually enjoy way more resources per capita. The system simply doesn't have to work as hard to keep everyone running smoothly. Moving on to our software options. OS 1, Capitalism Unlocked. So once your hardware is set, you've got to boot up an operating system. Think of a capitalistic economy as your fully unlocked, free enterprise, open source OS. Productive resources like factories, machines, plants, they are owned by private individuals. And their main objective? Earning profits. State or government intervention here is kept to an absolute minimum. Economic activities are largely uncoordinated by any central authority. Instead, everything is managed by Adam Smith's famous invisible hand of the price mechanism, where the market forces of demand and supply determine exactly how resources are allocated. Let's run a quick benchmark test on this unlocked OS. The merits are undeniably powerful. You get incredible incentives for technological progress and highly efficient use of resources because, well, inefficient apps just get deleted by the competition. Plus, you generally see a high standard of living with tons of consumer sovereignty, meaning you get to choose exactly what you want to install. But the demerits, they act as massive battery drain. You get acute wealth inequality, fierce class struggle, and severe economic instability. Essentially, your system can crash into brutal cycles of booms and depressions. Next up, we have OS 2, Managed Socialism. Now, if the totally open source chaos of capitalism isn't really your vibe, this is the ultimate closed, heavily managed ecosystem. A socialist economy fundamentally rewrites the source code. Instead of private ownership, all means of production, land, banks, trade, are owned by the entire society and operated by a public authority. That price mechanism from before, completely replaced by central economic planning. Instead of being driven by a profit motive, every single line of code in this OS is designed with one clear objective: maximizing the social welfare of the entire community. The benchmark test for socialism reveals a really fascinating trade-off. The merits include a highly equitable distribution of income, much fuller utilization of resources without that cyclical instability or unemployment, and the total elimination of class struggle because it specifically aims for a classless society. But then, look at the demerits. Users experience a total loss of consumer sovereignty. The central planners dictate exactly what gets produced, drastically limiting variety. You also face severe bureaucratic lag, or red tapeism, because every single decision has to be authenticated by central administrators. Finally, without private property or market competition, there is a massive loss of incentive for users to actually work efficiently. Which brings us to OS3, the mixed hybrid build. So, what if you want the best of both worlds? Well, a mixed economy is basically a custom ROM that directly attempts to patch the vulnerabilities of both extremes we just talked about. It combines elements of both capitalist and socialist economies. Its defining characteristic is the coexistence of a public sector, operating in the interest of society, running right alongside a private sector, which is driven by the profit motive. Here is how this hybrid actually routes its tasks. The public sector handles the really heavy, resource-intensive background processes, things like defense equipment and atomic energy. Meanwhile, the private sector is assigned consumer goods and agriculture. This OS retains the price mechanism and profit motive, keeping the system fast and innovative. However, the government runs background security protocols, like taxation, licensing, and subsidies, to strictly regulate that private sector. This ensures social welfare is promoted and acts as a hard check against the concentration of monopolistic economic power. I gotta throw up a quick warning flag for this hybrid build, though. Mixed systems run a very real risk of being short-lived. Over time, these two sectors often compete for processing power. If the public sector expands too much, it basically swallows the private sector, converting the whole system into pure socialism. But if the private sector dominates, it reverts right back to pure capitalism. Add in the frequent collisions and mistrust between sectors, plus sometimes excessive, irksome government regulations, and this OS can end up suffering from some highly inefficient operation. Finally, let's talk connectivity, global networks, and syncing. Because let's face it, a single device can only do so much on its own. It has to connect. Here are the rollout dates for the major network protocols, essentially the Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and 5G networks that connect these national economies to reduce trade barriers and optimize global output. In 1967, we saw the creation of ASEAN in Southeast Asia. In 1985, SAARC was founded for South Asian nations. 1993 marked the massive establishment of the European Union's single market, and in 1999, the G20 was formed, gathering the major developed and emerging economies into one hub. So, what exactly are these networks syncing up? The objectives are all about boosting overall processing power. The European Union aimed to develop an internal single market, ensuring the free movement of goods, services, and capital, even creating a common currency, the euro. The G20 meets annually to coordinate global monetary management and promote international financial stability. ASEAN formulates plans for deep economic cooperation, acting as a massive free trade zone. And SAARC focuses heavily on accelerating social progress and self-reliance among South Asian countries. Ultimately, it is all about increasing global bandwidth. So, the ultimate question we are left with today is this. We've looked at the base hardware of both developing and developed nations. We've reviewed the open source freedom of capitalism, the highly managed security of socialism, and the delicate balancing act of the mixed economy. If you are handed a developing nation with immense potential but serious internal lag, which economic operating system would you install to upgrade its hardware and maximize its global network syncing? Take a minute and really think about it. Thanks for joining this explainer. Keep optimizing your learning, and I'll see you in the next one.